Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a bit of a different turn. We're stepping away from markets, away from geopolitics really, and getting into one of the deepest questions I think that humans have ever asked. How do we find, lasting fulfillment?
It's the big one.
It really is. We're diving into the profound wisdom of Eastern philosophical traditions today. We'll be drawing a lot from Samkhya and Yoga especially.
Right. The idea is to try and map out the structure of human suffering itself, understand the nature of reality as they saw it, and crucially, the path to liberation they talked about.
It's definitely a deep dive into, let's say, the internal mechanics of meaning.
Exactly. And if you look across human history, this pursuit of happiness, it's always there, isn't it? It's eternal. But what causes our unhappiness? That seems to shift constantly.
Yeah, the specifics change. Our sources point this out millennia ago. The main worry might have been pure survival, a wild animal attack or just basic hunger.
Those immediate physical threats.
But for many people, particularly in developed parts of the world, civilization has kind of solved a lot of those objective threats. We've tackled diseases, built systems for material security, mostly wiped out large-scale starvation.
You've made huge strides on that front.
Yet that feeling, that restlessness, the dissatisfaction, it hasn't vanished, has it? It feels like our fears just became more abstract. Career failure, social competition, maybe just that nagging void of meaninglessness.
Precisely. The focus of the human challenge, it seems, has shifted inward. And this is why our sources make this really useful distinction, categorizing the quest for well-being into two paths.
Okay.
So first, there's what they call the outer path, or the objective path. Yeah. This is all about securing the external stuff, material stability, physical needs. And Western civilization, with science and industry, has really excelled here. We have unprecedented comfort in many ways.
Right, the external world.
But as you said, the material world can only satisfy so much. So the second path is the inner path, or I love this term the sources use, the psychic way.
The psychic way, okay.
And this path is dedicated purely to achieving that inner stuff. Peace, happiness, a sense of real existential meaning. It's like, while the West focused on engineering the world outside us,
Eastern philosophies were engineering the world inside us, developing these really sophisticated blueprints for, inner serenity.
That's exactly it. And that's our mission today, really, to try and understand these blueprints. We'll focus specifically on this idea of subject-object duality, the causes of suffering they identified, and this promise of Enstasy, liberation.
Okay, let's definitely unpack that central duality first, because it feels like everything else hinges on it. The source material sets it up right away as this fundamental conflict.
Yeah,
right?
At its core, you have the subject, that's the I, the consciousness, the perceiver, the one having the experience.
The agent within.
Right, and then you have the object, which is everything else, my life, my dreams, my goals. It's the external world, the stuff we interact with, the things that motivate us.
And the key is the interaction between them.
Absolutely. The subject needs the object, fundamentally. It's their interaction, their dance, that gives life its energy, its intention. Its color, as the sources put it.
So if you feel driven or excited about something,
it's because your subject, your I, has latched onto a specific object, a goal, maybe a relationship, even a belief system. There's a strong magnetic bond there.
Okay, and the sources use an analogy to make this clearer, right? The high-achieving career.
Yes, which is so relatable today, isn't it? Think about someone who spends decades just pushing to reach the absolute top of their field.
The C-suite, the Nobel Prize, maybe major artistic recognition, something tangible.
That specific external object, it ignites the subject's motivation. The chase provides meaning because the subject hasn't got the object yet. The tension is the lifeblood.
But here's the twist, the paradox the sources point out. What happens when they actually get there? When the subject finally secures that pinnacle object?
The success itself, the achievement, it actually disrupts that crucial subject-object interaction.
The motivator just evaporates. The mountain's climbed, the chase is over.
Exactly. And instead of lasting bliss, what often follows is this sense of, an existential void, the sources call it, or just plain absurdity.
Why? Why does reaching the goal lead to emptiness? It seems counterintuitive.
Because the subject's underlying desire is, in its essence, absolute. But the objects we pursue in the world are always temporal, always limited.
So the power, the wealth, the fame, they aren't really the end goal.
They're more like placeholders. Placeholders for the abstract fulfillment the subject is truly craving, like lasting peace or boundless joy, something unchanging. When you conquer a finite object, it just stops generating that tension, that meaning.
I see. The subject can't draw infinite satisfaction from a finite achievement.
It can't. The meaning wasn't really in the peak itself. It was generated during the climb. The moment the climb ends, the subject either has to find a new object, a new mountain, really fast.
Or face that uncomfortable truth that maybe the pursuit itself was the whole point. We see this pattern a lot, don't we? That sudden, aimless feeling in people who've achieved massive external success.
It's a stark lesson in transience, in impermanence.
Yeah.
And the sources give this duality proper philosophical weight, using specific terms. The subject, the pure essence, the I, is called Purusha in Samkhya and Yoga.
Purusha.
Pure consciousness, sheer presence, just witnessing. In Tantra, the equivalent is often Shiva. In Sufi thought, you might hear inner self or essence.
And this Purusha, this essence, it's described as unmoving, eternal, just watching.
That's the idea. It's the stable background. And contrasted with it is the object, the whole field of action, the manifest world. This is Prakriti in Samkhya and Yoga.
Prakriti.
Think of it as the primal urge for action, for manifestation. Nature itself, in a way. In Tantra, it corresponds to Shakti. Prakriti is the dynamic, changing material and psychological reality that Purusha interacts with.
So you've got this eternal passive consciousness, Purusha, engaging with the active, ever-changing world, Prakriti. And that engagement, that interaction, that's where life gets its color, but also where the problems start.
Precisely. That dance is where all the drama, all the challenges rise.
Okay, so we've got Purusha, the subject, the essence, and Prakriti, the object, the world of action. Now, why do they even engage? What's the underlying motivation? The sources talk about three fundamental drives, right? Intrinsic motivations deep in the psyche.
Yes, these are really fundamental. They're not just things we want. They're described as the very nature of reality, which we as humans experience in a kind of fragmented way. These are what Purusha projects onto Prakriti.
They're often grouped together
as the Trinity, Sat, Chit, Ananda.
Sat, Chit, Ananda. Let's break those down, starting with Sat.
Sat translates roughly as pure existence, being itself. In human terms, this shows up as that powerful will to survive, the basic drive for self-preservation, exerting power just to keep existing. It's the fundamental assertion, I am.
Okay, the drive to simply be. Then Chit.
Chit is consciousness, but more specifically, the development of existence. It's the will to expand, to grow your position, to acquire knowledge, wisdom, understanding. That innate human hunger to learn, connect the dots, evolve. It's the assertion, I know, or I understand.
Makes sense. And the third, Ananda.
Ananda is bliss, happiness, ultimate peace. It's the drive to find pleasure in achievements, or more deeply, the pursuit of profound, unconditional love and joy. The assertion, I am joyous.
So existence, consciousness development, and bliss. Sat, Chit, Ananda.
And the sources say that the ultimate reality, the state of true wholeness, is when these three are perfectly unified, melded together. That's the state that transcends the whole subject-object split.
That's where Purusha naturally resides, before it gets involved with Prakriti.
Exactly, before the fragmentation.
That sounds incredibly abstract, though. How do they make that relatable? A state of perfect unity?
Well, they point to some very basic human experiences. They compare it to deep, dreamless sleep, or maybe the pure, unburdened state of early infancy.
Ah, okay. States where there's no choice, no responsibility, no desire, no real challenge.
Precisely. There's a natural inner peace because duality hasn't really kicked in yet. Sufi thought talks about this as the inside of human inner, a realm of perfect quiet before the mind gets noisy.
So when we wake up from that deep sleep or grow out of infancy into conscious life, that unified Sat, Chit, Ananda fragments. The subject, Purusha, rooted in Sat existence, wakes up and starts looking outward for its development, Chit, and its bliss, Ananda, in the objects of Prakriti.
Yes, and that outward search, based on fragmentation, is what creates the essential problem, the gap, the space between the subject and the object it desires.
And this gap isn't just empty, it's where all the conscious challenges arise, the journey we have to take.
Exactly, it's the birthplace of the struggle.
And this gap, this space, it has names in these traditions, doesn't it? Like Leela and Maya.
Correct. Leela is often translated as cosmic play or divine sport, especially in traditions like Vaishnavism.
Play, that sounds almost trivial for something involving suffering.
Well, the idea behind play is that the challenges, the tribulations in this gap, aren't just random misery. They're seen as a purposeful, necessary engagement, a kind of divine game where the subject learns and grows, expresses itself through action. Remember Chit, the development. The challenge is actually essential for that.
Okay, so Leela frames the struggle as developmental play. But the term we probably hear more often is Maya, the illusion.
Yes, Maya. And it's often misunderstood. The crucial point the sources make is that Maya doesn't mean the world itself, Prakriti, isn't real. It's not saying your life is a dream in that sense.
Well, what is the illusion?
The illusion is the perceived division, the feeling that Purusha, subject, and Prakriti, object, are fundamentally separate things with this huge chasm between them that we have to cross to get what we want.
Maya is the veil that makes us forget they actually share a fundamental unity. We think we need to bridge the gap to find happiness out there.
When in reality, the source of that happiness is connected to our own nature, our own essence. Maya makes us believe the journey is purely external.
But if they share a unity, why does the gap feel so real? Why does the play, the Leela, often feel so much like suffering, like dukkha?
That's the crux. Once the subject fragments from that unified Sat Chit Ananda state, it becomes deeply convinced of its separateness. It buys into the illusion of division, Maya.
It takes the game, the Leela, too seriously.
Exactly. It mistakes the props in the game, the transient objects, the goals, the achievements for the ultimate prize. The struggle then becomes the subject desperately trying to rediscover that fundamental unity, but trying to do it within the rules of the dualistic world, by grabbing external things, which is inherently impossible. You can't find absolute unity through relative objects alone.
Okay, that clarifies Maya and Leela, but it leads to a really profound question. If this interaction, this dance in the gap, is the source of all the color and meaning and motivation in life, why? Why would the great Eastern sages, people like the Buddha, want to leave it all? Why seek to transcend this whole captivating circle? Why try to get out of the game?
It's a central question. They sought transcendence, ultimately, because they realized that the very structure of the game, the fundamental nature of existence itself, Prakriti, has certain built-in properties that basically guarantee eventual disappointment.
Even if you play the game well, even if you experience incredible things.
Even then, think of the circle of human experiences as incredibly vast. It contains everything, the most consuming love, like Romeo's maybe, but also the most destructive jealousy, like Othello's. Joy, despair, pride, humility, everything.
And the sources seem to suggest that experiencing a wide range of this, traversing both the bright spots and the dark corners, is actually necessary for deep, mature understanding.
Right.
You can't really appreciate peace if you haven't known turmoil.
Exactly. The human journey seems designed, in a way, to experience the full spectrum. But the sages, through deep introspection, realize something crucial. No matter how wide a circle you traverse within that realm of experience, no matter how great the love or how massive the achievement, the experience itself is inherently flawed. It's built on unstable ground.
So the problem isn't the specific object you attain, good or bad. It's the fundamental nature of all objects within Prakriti.
Yes. They saw that the ground rules of existence inevitably lead to disillusionment, so they sought an escape from those very rules. This led to concepts like nirvana, the extinction of that restless craving,
Right.
or shunya, emptiness, the void beyond concepts, or fana in Sufism, annihilation of the false self.
And these inescapable ground rules, the ones they wanted to escape, are what they codified as the three fundamental properties of existence, or Prakriti.
Precisely. The three marks of existence, as they're often called in Buddhism, though the concepts resonate across these traditions. The first mark is anicca.
Anisha, variability, change.
Ceaseless change. Nothing in the object world, nothing in Prakriti stays the same. Nothing maintains absolute stability.
We see this most obviously with physical aging, right?
Yeah.
No matter how much care you take, the body changes relentlessly.
That's a clear example, but anicca goes much deeper than the physical body. Think about our thoughts, our beliefs, our intellectual constructs.
Our convictions.
Exactly. Political systems rise and fall. Social norms shift dramatically. Even deeply held personal beliefs can transform. Think of figures like St. Augustine, who had a radical conversion, or the philosopher Wittgenstein, who fundamentally changed his views mid-career. What you believe with certainty today might seem alien tomorrow.
So anisha means that the very foundation you try to build your identity or meaning on, if it's external, is constantly dissolving under your feet, like building on sand.
That's a perfect image for it. It makes chasing absolute goals in this changing world seem, well, inherently frustrating.
Which leads logically to the second property.
Anatma. The absence of a fixed, permanent identity or self.
No fixed self.
If everything is constantly changing, anisha, then nothing within that changing world, not our thoughts, not our roles, not our relationships, not our jobs, can possess an enduring, fixed essence. Life just resists the idea of an unchanging, static me.
That feels deeply challenging in a modern context. We invest so much in our identities, don't we? Our I amness is often tied directly to our job title, our social status, our role as a parent.
We are the CEO, the artist, the parent, the activist. But according to this view, those are just temporary roles, temporary labels. Life, Prakriti, doesn't recognize a static ego that holds onto these roles permanently.
There's a story in the sources that illustrates this, isn't there? About Ibrahim Adam.
Yes, a beautiful story. Ibrahim Adam was, the story goes, the ruler of bulk, living in immense luxury and splendor in his palace, the very symbol of permanence and power.
Okay.
Then one day, a mysterious figure, Khidr, often seen as an enigmatic guide or sage, appears, disguised as a simple cameler. He just walks into the palace.
Bold move for a cameleer.
Indeed. And he asks if he can rest his camels and spend the night in the caravanserai.
The caravanserai, an inn for travelers.
Exactly. And Ibrahim Adam, the king, is naturally taken aback. He corrects him, "This isn't an inn, old man. This is my royal palace."
And Khidr's response.
Khidr asks a simple, devastating question. "Who lived in this palace before you?" Ibrahim replies, "My father. And before him, my grandfather. And before him, his ancestors."
Ah, I see where this is going.
Then Khidr delivers the punchline. "A place where people come and go, one replacing another, generation after generation. What is that, O king, but a caravanserai, a temporary lodging?"
Wow, that hits hard. The ultimate symbol of permanence, the palace, is just a stopping point on a journey.
It perfectly illustrates anatma. Our roles, our positions, even our grandest achievements are like that palace temporary residences. The moment we try to fix our identity, our permanent sense of self, to that temporary role or place, we're setting ourselves up for the pain of loss when it inevitably changes. Because it will change.
So anisha, everything changes. And anatma, no fixed self to hold on to amidst the change. These inevitably lead to the third mark.
They inevitably generate the third mark of existence, dukkha, suffering.
Dukkha. We often translate it just as suffering, but the sources dig into the word itself, don't they?
They do. The etymology is revealing. Du means two, and akash refers to ether or space.
But dukkha literally means the space between two things, a gap.
Yes. In this grand philosophical context, the two things are the subject, purusha, and the object, prakriti, the gap between the seeker and the sought.
This is critical. So dukkha isn't just about stubbing your toe or feeling sad. It's something more fundamental.
Much more fundamental. It's an abstract existential suffering. It arises automatically from that perpetual gap between the subject, the I, with its absolute desires, trying to find fulfillment and permanence in a world defined by constant change, anisha, and impermanent roles, anatma. The gap itself, the fundamental mismatch, is dukkha.
That makes the diagnosis incredibly profound. The suffering isn't just a possible outcome of the interaction. It's baked into the very structure of conscious experience in a dualistic world. The moment the subject tries to get its absolute needs met by finite objects, dukkha is already present in that striving.
That's the insight. The problem is structural.
Okay, so if dukkha is this abstract suffering from the subject-object gap, let's get into the nitty-gritty mechanics. Why does this gap cause suffering, and how does it trap us? What keeps the cycle going?
We have to go back to that core conflict. The subject, purusha, it has these innate absolute needs or aspirations, remember. Sat, chit, ananda. Absolute survival and being, boundless wisdom and growth, pure, unadulterated happiness and peace.
These aren't just casual wants, they're fundamental to its nature.
Yep.
Existential demands.
Exactly. They feel absolute, but the stage on which it tries to fulfill them, the object world, prakriti, is inherently restricted. It's defined by limits. By anisha, change, by anatma, instability, it's simply not equipped structurally to satisfy the subject's absolute demands.
So the world can offer temporary fixes, relative satisfaction, but never the absolute fulfillment the subject inherently craves.
Precisely. And that dissonance, that fundamental mismatch, is the engine of the trap. We feel restless because the world gives us glimpses, tastes of satisfaction, but they always fade. The moment we achieve something, that deep inner yearning for absolute unchanging fulfillment is still there, unmet, so it drives us back out, chasing the next object.
Always seeking the next hit of relative happiness.
And this whole intricate structure, how this dissatisfaction manifests and perpetuates itself, is mapped out brilliantly in the Yoga Sutras. It's called the Pancha Klesha, the 5 causes of suffering, or 5 afflictions.
Pancha Klesha, okay. And they're interconnected, like dominoes.
Exactly like dominoes. A chain reaction that starts from that fundamental subject-object interaction. The first klesha, the root cause, is avidya.
Avidya, which means ignorance.
Yes, but not ignorance like lacking information in a book. It's a fundamental existential ignorance. It's the primary error that arises when the subject engages the object.
What's the error specifically?
The error is believing, intellectually and intuitively, that you can fulfill the subject's absolute demands, perfect security, total wisdom, endless happiness, within the limited, fluctuating world of prakriti. It's a deep misunderstanding of the nature of reality and its constraints.
So avidya is the flawed starting premise. I can find the absolute in the relative. But how does that intellectual mistake turn into active personal suffering?
That's the function of the second klesha, asmita. This translates as ego, or more literally, I amness.
Asmita, the ego.
Asmita is the direct psychological consequence of avidya. Because of that fundamental ignorance, avidya, the subject projects a false, limited identity onto itself, the ego. This ego is the part of us that becomes convinced it is the agent that can achieve those absolute goals out there in the pluralistic world. It builds a sense of self around that flawed premise.
So the ego isn't the true self, Purusha, but a construct built on the misunderstanding.
Exactly. The ego is the mechanism that traps the individual in the cycle. It mistakenly identifies the I with the temporary roles, achievements, and body-mind complex, believing this constructed self is separate from and can conquer the changing flow of prakriti. It seeks lasting gratification where it fundamentally can't be found.
Okay, so avidya, ignorance, leads to asmita, ego. The fortress is built. What happens next?
Once that ego fortress, asmita, is established, it inevitably starts interacting with the world through preference, likes and dislikes. This gives rise to the third and fourth kleshas, which are the primary emotional reactions.
Let's say the ego-driven subject actually succeeds in getting a desired object, the promotion, the relationship, the praise.
That temporary success generates enthusiasm, pleasure, and crucially, attachment. That attachment is the third klesha, raga.
Raga, attachment or clinging.
Yes, it's that intense identification with the pleasant experience or object. You grasp onto it, desperately wanting it to last forever, even though initial change guarantees it won't. You want to freeze that pleasant moment.
And the flip side, when the subject doesn't get what it wants or when the pleasant thing inevitably changes or disappears.
That frustration, that disappointment, that inability to fulfill the need or the pain when a raga-driven attachment dissolves that suffering is characterized by the fourth klesha, dvesha, aversion or repulsion.
Jivesha, pushing away the unpleasant.
Exactly. Dvesha is resistance. It's the refusal to accept the reality of impermanence, loss, or discomfort. It's trying to push away unpleasant change or block undesirable outcomes. Raga and Dvesha are two sides of the same coin, grasping for the pleasant, rejecting the unpleasant. Both stem from the ego, asmita, trying to control a changing reality based on that initial ignorance, avidya.
Okay, so we have ignorance, ego, attachment to pleasure, aversion to pain. But what keeps this cycle running? Why don't we just learn from the inevitable disappointment of raga and vesha and fikata? Stop.
That's the linchpin. The fifth and final klesha, abhinivesha. This is usually translated as a will to live or clinging to life.
Abhinivesha. But isn't the will to live a good thing?
It's more nuanced than just biological survival, though that's part of it. In this context, abhinivesha is the deep-seated desire, the thirst, to continue living within the narratives and dramas of this dualistic life. It's the powerful momentum that keeps us invested in the game, even after repeated disappointments. Even when the ego gets battered by change and loss, abhinivesha pulls us back in, makes us want to try again within the same flawed framework. It sustains the whole cycle.
So let me see if I've got the loop. Our absolute nature clashes with the finite world, avidya. We build a false self, an ego, that thinks it can bridge this gap externally, asmita. This ego gets hooked on temporary pleasures, raga, and pushes away inevitable pains, dvesha. And despite the suffering this causes, a powerful underlying drive, abhinivesha, keeps us clinging to this whole process, ensuring we repeat the cycle.
That's the mechanism, precisely. A self-perpetuating cycle fueled by fundamental ignorance about our true nature and the nature of reality. Millennia of introspection led these sages to conclude: you can rearrange the external objects all you want, but you'll never quench that fundamental restlessness of the subject that way. The problem is structural, rooted in the consciousness that perceives separation, maya, and then acts based on ignorance, avidya.
Wow, that's a heavy diagnosis.
Yeah.
If our very consciousness, operating through this klesha cycle, traps us in structural disappointment, the solution must be equally radical, right? What do these traditions prescribe? How do you break the cycle?
The ultimate solution proposed, especially clearly in the Yoga Sutras, is Samadhi, which is often translated as concentration or absorption, but in its highest form, it leads to enstasy.
Enstasy. Not ecstasy, but enstasy. Staying within.
Exactly. It implies an inward absorption, a standing within the self rather than being pulled outward. It's the state of non-dualistic realization, the ultimate release from the endless cycle of dukkha generated by the kleshas.
It sounds like withdrawing from the world, though. Is it just a kind of spiritual checking out? Escapism?
That's a common misconception. It's better understood as a radical shift in perspective, not necessarily a physical withdrawal. Enstasy requires the practitioner to consciously suspend the subject's habitual attachment to and identification with external objects and phenomena.
Suspending the connection.
Yes, allowing for a momentary but profound detachment from the relentless pull of the external world and the ego's demands. It's not about ignoring the world, but about suspending the ego's need for the world to provide validation and absolute fulfillment.
And in that moment of suspension.
In that space of quiet detachment, the individual can experience a direct existential comprehension, something that goes beyond words, beyond intellectual understanding.
How does this detachment actually solve the problem, though? How does it resolve that fundamental subject-object duality that started all the trouble?
Because, according to these traditions, those who access states of ecstasy, even briefly, come to a startling realization. They see directly that the dreams, the ambitions, the feelings of ultimate bliss and peace they were projecting onto external objects actually mirror the very essence of their own existence, their own Purusha, in its most abstract, pure form. Satchit Ananda isn't out there. It's the nature of the subject itself.
So the realization is the seeker and the sought are fundamentally the same.
Precisely. The subject and the object, Purusha and Prakriti, are ultimately expressions of a single, non-dual reality. This is where that famous Vedanta statement clicks into place, I am that. Or, in Sanskrit, Tattvamasi, my deepest essence is identical with the ultimate reality I was seeking outside myself.
We chase the job, the partner, the knowledge, because they seem to promise happiness or fulfillment.
Because they temporarily reflect those core absolute needs, Sat, Chit, Ananda, back to us. But the source of those needs and their ultimate fulfillment was never out there in the object. It is the subject. Enstasy is the moment the subject stops its frantic outward run and realizes, the goal was already here, within.
That sounds like it would require an incredibly sharp, refined internal ability to see through the ego's projections.
It does. And the sources call this crucial faculty viveka, discernment, clear seeing.
Viveka.
Viveka is the mental clarity, the sharp intelligence needed to constantly differentiate between the transient ego, asmita, and the true, unchanging identity, purusha. It's the ability to stay grounded in your core reality, the witnessing self, even amidst the chaos and drama of life, lila, without getting swept away by raga and devesha.
So liberation, then, is fundamentally about using viveka to achieve the annihilation of the ego. Not the true self, but the false constructed asmita.
Yes. When the identification with the asmita, the limited ego, is shed through viveka and deepened by ecstatic experiences, that false dichotomy between subject and object dissolves. The individual realizes their union with the most abstract dreams they were projecting onto objects.
And that union brings
profound wholeness, deep inner peace, stable happiness, a sense of blessing the Sat Chit Ananda realized not as something to get, but as one's own nature. The objects of the world then lose their power to trip us, because we're no longer desperately projecting our need for absolute fulfillment onto them.
Enstasy sounds very advanced, very abstract. Is it completely out of reach for most people?
Well, the sources suggest we actually get fleeting glimpses of this egoless state quite often, even without formal practice. Think about those moments when you're completely absorbed in an activity the flow state athletes or artists talk about.
Or your sense of self kind of disappears into the action.
Exactly. Or consider moments of being utterly captivated by overwhelming natural beauty, a stunning sunset, a vast mountain vista, or maybe being completely lost in a piece of exquisite music or art.
Okay, yes. Those moments of awe.
In those moments, what's happening? The chattering ego often temporarily switches off. You're not thinking about your to-do list, your anxieties, your social standing. You're just connected directly with the experience. The beauty, the sound, the presence.
You're connecting with it without the usual filter of knowledge, information, or ego-driven needs like, what can this do for me?
Precisely. And notice the feeling that comes with that temporary loss of ego projection. It's often profound contentment, peace, even joy, just from momentarily dropping the demanding self.
That's a really powerful point. If we can find that much peace just by losing ourselves briefly in an external object of beauty, which is still part of Prakriti, then the psychic way is suggesting.
Imagine the depth of peace, the stability of joy. That could be possible by venturing further inward, by becoming enraptured not just with external beauty, but with the true, unchanging beauty of the inner self, the Purusha itself.
Realizing that the source of Satchitananda is within.
That's the ultimate realization according to these traditions. It's not that the external world is inherently bad or needs to be permanently rejected. The issue is our flawed approach to it, projecting absolute needs onto a relative reality, driven by the kleshas. Genuine, lasting inner peace only becomes truly stable when that fundamental duality is seen through and overcome. Enstasy is the gateway.
This has been, well, incredibly clarifying. A challenging but really reflective deep dive into the core ideas of Samkhya and Yoga on life, suffering, and liberation. Let's try and synthesize the main takeaways from our journey today.
Okay. We started with that foundational duality. The subject, Purusha, the I, versus the object, Prakriti, my life. We saw their interaction creates meaning, but it's inherently unstable.
Right. And the reason for that instability lies in the nature of the object world itself, defined by anisha, constant change, and anatma, no fixed permanent self or identity. Remember the palace, just a caravanserai.
And this inherent transience guarantees dukkha, that background hum of existential suffering, the gap between the subject's absolute desires, Satchitananda, and the world's finite, changing offerings.
And we mapped out precisely how this suffering perpetuates itself through the Pancha Klesha cycle. It starts with avidya, fundamental ignorance, which creates the false asmita ego.
Which then gets caught in the emotional push-pull of raga, attachment to pleasure, and dvesha, aversion to pain. And the whole cycle is kept spinning by abhinivesha, that deep clinging to life within this dualistic framework.
But crucially, there's a path out. Liberation is possible through Enstasy, Samadhi, the deep inward absorption that comes from shedding the ego's identifications.
Leading to the profound realization that subject and object are ultimately one, tat tvamasi, I am that. The peace and wisdom sought outside were within all along.
So the timeless message here seems crystal clear. The real quest for meaning isn't about accumulating things or achievements externally. It's fundamentally an inner odyssey, a deeply personal journey.
Yes. It's about cultivating viveka, that clear discernment, to recognize the illusions of the ego and ground ourselves in the deeper reality of our own consciousness, where true peace resides.
Which brings us to a really fascinating final thought, something the sources hint at about the experience of the sages after they achieved this kind of liberation.
Yes. They found that the world, Prakriti, didn't just disappear for them. Instead, the vibrant, dynamic world actually regained its significance, but in a completely new way.
How so?
It transformed. It was no longer seen as a source of potential fulfillment or frustration for the ego. Instead, it became a manifestation of blessings, a playground of wisdom, a reflection of the unified reality they had realized within. This only happened after they had ventured into that inner realm of colorlessness, the transcendence of the separate self.
So the world only becomes truly beautiful, truly meaningful, in a stable way after we stop demanding absolute happiness from it, after we detach our ego's needs from it.
That seems to be the implication.
What does that transformation, seeing the ordinary world again, but through this lens of blessing and wisdom, suggest about how we might engage with our own goals, our work, our everyday challenges, maybe starting tomorrow?
Perhaps the ultimate achievement isn't about conquering the external world to finally get happiness, but about conquering the internal illusion of the separate self to realize the happiness that was always already present. And finding that, in doing so, the world itself transforms before our eyes.
A powerful thought to end on. The inner work continues. Until next time, keep digging deep.